Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, and let's talk some more about the 3 knight d7 Philidor defense. This is going to be an expansion on my previous video on this line, so if you've not viewed it, I'd encourage you to go and take a look. Okay, so black plays 3 knight d7, and white's reply is bishop c4. There's really no reason to play any other move. It gets a piece off of the back rank, develops with pressure on f7, and e6 also is weak because the knight on d7 is blocking the bishop's access to it. So bishop c4, very dangerous looking attacking move. Knight g5 is a concern for black in a lot of these lines. So as I discussed in the previous video, c6, which controls the d5 square and also provides black's queen with an escape hatch so that it's not trapped by any knight coming to e6. This c6 I described as being the only move, but that's not exactly true. Well, more on that later. So on bishop e7, as I explained in the previous video, white wins with d takes e5, because there's a vulnerability on f7. And also, knight to gf6, there's also d takes e5, intending to follow with knight g5. And that also wins because of the attack on f7. So after c6, white castles. White is waiting for black to bring the bishop to e7, which is a natural part of his development, because with the bishop on e7, the black queen can't access e7 or f6, so the defense of f7 is impeded. So after white castles and black plays bishop to e7, now white should throw in d takes e5 and d takes e5 so that black can't throw in a capture on d4 later. So now knight to g5, and this launches the double attack on f7. The simplest way to meet this is just to capture the knight. Bishop takes g5. And now queen h5 threatens queen takes f7 checkmate, and also the bishop on g5. So white is going to recover his piece after, say, queen e7. Queen takes g5. This is a slight advantage for white because he has a pair of bishops against black's bishop and knight. So white would like to trade queens. So this is why he should take with the queen on g5 and not the bishop, as I showed in my previous video. It just makes more sense. I mean, black is probably not going to want to trade queens, but anyway, it's a small nagging advantage for white, to have the bishop pair with pawns on both sides of the board. So bishop takes g5. It's a simple answer to black's problems, but it definitely gives white an advantage. I discussed knight h6 as an alternative to the bishop takes g5. Knight h6 protects the pawn on f7 and prepares castling. The knight is somewhat misplaced on h6, but still, this move is very possible. Queen h5 is the line I discussed in the previous video, which adds another attacker to f7, forcing black to castle. But this line, I'm not sure why I recommended this for white. It's only marginally better for white. There is actually a much sharper move, which I was not aware of at the time, in response to knight h6. And if you play this way, against the Philidor, trying to take advantage of black's move order with knight d7, or if you were considering playing the Philidor knight d7 line, it might be very important for you to know this line, actually. The move in question is knight e6, and this move turns out to be very strong. I think the best black can do is go into a middle game down the pawn after knight to e6. It's very disruptive. Hits the queen, hits g7, which is hanging. Also, there's a discovered attack on the knight on h6. So knight e6 is the best way to exploit the knight coming out to h6. F takes e is kind of forced, and now white plays bishop takes h6. Now it's important to know some of the tactics in this line. For instance, the bishop is untakeable. If black plays g takes h6, the g pawn has given up its important function of being able to go to g6. So white plays queen h5 check, king f8 is forced, and now bishop takes e6. Now, with all the pieces in the vicinity of the black king, you'd think there'd be some defense to mate, but no. White is threatening queen f7 checkmate. The only move that prevents this is queen e8, but that takes an importance as square away from black's king. Queen takes h6 checkmate. So the bishop cannot be recaptured on h6. Say black castles. This is probably the best line for him, just guarding the g-pawn. This pawn is hanging, but it's in white's best interest not to take it right away, but to play queen to g4. This threatens mate, and if black were to push this pawn forward, then white could just play bishop takes rook. Or maybe take on e6 first and then play bishop takes rook. So bishop f6, defending the mate, then white wins the pawn, bishop takes e6 check, king h8, and now just retreats the bishop, bishop e3. This position should favor white. He's up a pawn and doesn't really have any problems. So what if black plays knight b6 instead? Black is trying to set up a situation where this bishop is hanging and this bishop is also hanging, and he wants to win a piece, basically. So in this position, let's say white were to capture the queen on d8, which would be a mistake. I don't know, let's just look at this. Bishop takes. Now, two bishops are hanging. So if white protects one of the bishops, then he's going to lose the other bishop. White can play bishop takes, hitting the rook, but then the rook just moves. Now, white still has this problem of two pieces that are unprotected. So, queen takes d8 is a losing move. Queen h5 is the critical response. Now, there are three legal moves here. Black's king moves both lose. It's important to know why. King d7, trying to just run to the queen side, loses to rook d1 check. Bishop d6 is forced. Now bishop takes g7. It's very powerful, threatening bishop takes e5, which intensifies the pressure on the pinned bishop on d6. Also threatening just to take on h8. And queen f7 is also a strong threat. Now, black can snap up this bishop on c4. This protects the bishop on d6. But white has a very, very strong response, knight a3, developing his final piece, trying to eliminate this defender of the bishop on d6, connecting his rooks. Black cannot survive this position. So, king f8 instead, just trying to run the king over to the king side. White needs to include another piece in the attack. I mean, otherwise he's got the problem where both of his bishops are hanging. So, how to include another piece in the attack? Well, what about the rook on f1? if white plays pawn to f4, now if black takes on f4 or white takes on e5, because this black pawn is blockaded, there's no way for black to prevent the f file from opening. So it's in black's interest to just keep on going, get off of that file. F takes e5, and now queen f7 is threatened. So in order to prevent that, black needs to first throw this check, get the king in the corner. Now queen e7. It looks like black is covering everything. He's got still got the attack on both of white's bishops and the possibility of moving the queen's bishop into the defense. But white has a very crushing move here. Can you find it? The move is bishop takes g7. Bishop takes g7, there are numerous threats. There's bishop f8 hitting the queen, bishop takes rook, also bishop f6 is very, very strong. If the bishop is captured, then say queen takes g7, now that gives up the e8 square. So queen e8 check, and the rook is on f8. So the queen is discouraged from blocking. But after bishop f8, bishop takes e6, and this is going to lead to checkmate. So queen takes loses. King takes, the black king after queen to g4 check is going to have to go for a long walk. Say king to h6, rook f6 check forces black to give up his queen. Takes, pawn takes. Now black can snap up this bishop on c4. He has a lot of material for the queen. Unfortunately, black is gained checkmated by force after queen to g7 check, pulling the black king towards white's pieces. g4 check, king h4, queen h6 check, king takes g4, knight c3. And this is going to mate very shortly after the white rook joins in the attack. White's threatening stuff like some combination of h3 and knight e2, rook f1, try and mate. Yeah, so is a brutal continuation. So if the bishop is not taken, well, then h6, just take the rook. And rook f6 is fairly crushing. What about bishop d7? Well, here there's bishop f6. Queen f7, queen g4 check, and say queen g6. Now white wins another pawn on e6. Queen f7 is forced. Queen g4 check. Queen g6. Queen h3. And white has emerged, well, he's up 3 pawns. He's going to play like knight c3, maybe rook f3, rook g3. Is incredibly depressing. And the white bishop is very powerful on f6, but white could take the rook at any time. So that line, king f8, is not good either. g6 is the only move. So after g6, the bishop is no longer on prise, so white just plays queen e2, protecting the bishop on c4. So after knight takes c4, queen takes c4, black has, well, is even material, but black has these ugly doubled pawns. Black can play queen d4 to try to, coax white into taking on d4 and fixing the pawn structure. Also, maybe hitting b2, hitting the queen. So it is a forcing move. Knight to d2 just developing, because the bishop guards this knight, the knight guards the queen, and white is preparing to, bring a rook to the d file, maybe kick that queen away with c3, etc. So after like queen takes b2, there's rook f d1, And this position, even though black is up a pawn, is very difficult to see how what black's going to do with his king. I mean, the white bishop is controlling the weak dark squares. This rook is looking at the d file, so preparing to help pin the black king in the center. If black moves this bishop out, hanging the b pawn, then white can consider playing rook b1 followed by rook takes b7. Is a very, very difficult position for black. So that is the line that I would recommend against knight h6. I would play knight e6, forcing this take, and then take on h6. And then, yeah, either castles, where black just goes down a pawn, or knight b6, where black can go up a pawn but have a miserable position. So yeah, these have been some more of my thoughts on the on the Philidor knight d7 main line. Just real quick, I've noticed that aside from e takes d, giving up the center and allowing queen takes d4, and c6, there's actually another move here which I never really considered before, but I found quite interesting. There's knight b6, moving black's only developed piece for a second time and hitting the bishop on c4. And the bishop, and say it goes back to b3, now black can't really maintain the point on e5 anymore, so he captures on d4. This is a line which might be the subject of another video. I think, it is a passive defense for black, but there's some interesting ideas here. I think it might be all right, actually, a good alternative to those to those main lines with c6, if black is looking to do something a little different. Anyway, this has been part 2 of my examination of the Philidor with 3 knight d7. Thank you for watching, and I hope you picked something up.